The knock came at 11:47 at night, sharp and deliberate, like someone who had been standing at that door for a long time before finally finding the courage to raise their hand. Marcus had been sitting in the dark again, the way he always did since the accident, a cold cup of coffee on the table beside him, and the television playing some late-night program he wasn't really watching. He almost didn't answer. He had become very good at not answering, not the door, not his phone, not the quiet ache inside his chest that never quite went away. But something about the sound of that knock was different. It wasn't.
You're watching Wake Up Files, where every story carries a message of hope, kindness, and unexpected miracles. If you believe one story can inspire millions, press like, share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Wake Up Files so you never miss a story like this.
A gentleman who communicated exclusively through printed notes, slipped under the door, seemed to prefer it that way too. Marcus had chosen invisibility the way other people choose furniture deliberately, with purpose, because he needed it to survive. After losing his wife Renata to a car accident on a rainy October highway, after watching everything they had built together collapse into a pile of insurance paperwork and sympathy casseroles, and a silence so thick it had texture, he had packed 2 bags, left the house they had shared, and arrived at apartment 14B like a man who had given up on being found. For over a year, he existed rather than lived. He went to work at the architecture firm because he had to, came home because there was nowhere else to go, and filled the hours in between with the particular emptiness that only grief can manufacture. He knew his neighbor in 14A existed. He had heard her heels in the hallway, seen the warm light under her door, noticed once, without meaning to, the smell of something wonderful cooking garlic and rosemary drifting into the corridor. He had even, on 3 separate occasions, picked up a package left outside her door by mistake and placed it carefully back without knocking. He told himself he was being considerate of her time. The truth was he simply could not afford the risk of being seen. Her name, he would later learn, was Sienna, and she had been watching him disappear for months. When Marcus finally opened the door that night, he found her standing there in a burgundy dress, her dark hair falling past her shoulders, her expression carrying something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite sadness, but lived somewhere uneasily between the two. She wasn't holding anything, no borrowed cup of sugar, no misdelivered package, no polite excuse to explain the hour. She just stood there and looked at him with eyes that had clearly made a decision before the rest of her had caught up. And she said that she could not keep watching him vanish and say nothing about it. She said it quietly, without drama, the way people say things they have rehearsed alone many times before finally speaking aloud. Marcus stared at her. He had not been looked at like that, really looked at. The way she was looking at him in over a year. He felt the strange, disorienting sensation of being visible again, and it was more frightening than he had expected. He told her he didn't know what she meant. She told him that she thought he did. He let her in because he didn't have the energy to argue, and because somewhere beneath all that carefully constructed numbness, some small and stubborn part of him was desperately tired of the dark. She sat across from him at the kitchen table, and for a long time neither of them said very much. She told him that she had moved to Clearwater Lane 2 years ago, after her own life had been taken apart, a broken engagement. A career she had loved and lost when the company downsized without warning, a period of her own where the walls had felt like they were pressing inward. She said she had learned, the painful way, that silence has a weight to it, and if you carry it long enough it stops feeling like protection and starts feeling like a prison. Marcus sat very still while she spoke. He was not a man who cried easily. He hadn't cried, in fact, since the night of the accident, when he had sat in a hospital waiting room and a doctor had walked toward him with a face that already told the whole story. He had not cried since then, because crying felt like it would open something he would never be able to close again. But sitting in his own kitchen at nearly midnight, listening to this woman he barely knew speak about grief, as though she had drawn it from a map of his own interior, he felt something begin to loosen somewhere deep in his chest. It was not comfortable. It felt the way a frozen limb feels when blood begins to return to it, aching and burning and alive all at once. He told her about Renata. He hadn't said her name out loud to anyone in months. He said it carefully, the way you carry something fragile, and then all at once the words began coming in a way he couldn't manage or predict. He talked about how she had laughed, how she had reorganized the kitchen cabinets every few months, because she was always convinced there was a more logical system, how she had held his hand in movie theaters, even during the scenes that weren't sad. He talked about the morning of the accident, how ordinary it had been, how he had kissed her goodbye at the door without any special awareness that it was the last time, how the ordinary nature of it haunted him more than anything else. He talked until the cold coffee on the table had been replaced with hot tea that Sienna had quietly made somewhere in the middle of everything, and the clock on the wall said it was almost 2 in the morning. When he finally stopped talking, the apartment felt different. Not lighter exactly, but more honest. As though the air itself had been holding its breath and had finally been given permission to exhale. Sienna did not try to fix anything that night. She didn't offer him platitudes about time healing wounds or Renata being in a better place, or any of the well-meaning phrases that people deploy when they don't know what else to say. She simply sat with him in the truth of what he was carrying, and that, Marcus would later think, was the most generous thing anyone had done for him in longer than he could remember. Before she left, she paused at the door and told him that she wasn't asking him to be okay, that she wasn't asking him to pretend or perform or rush toward any kind of recovery on a schedule that made other people more comfortable. She was only asking him not to disappear entirely. She said it the way someone says something they mean completely, and then she walked back across the hallway to apartment 14A and quietly closed her door. Marcus stood alone in his apartment for a long time after that. Then he did something he had not done in 14 months. He walked to the window, opened it, and let the night air in. The weeks that followed were not a transformation. Real life doesn't work in transformations, it works in small, stubborn increments, in the accumulation of tiny choices made in the direction of living rather than merely existing. Marcus began by leaving his door open a few inches on Sunday mornings. Then, he started knocking on Sienna's door to return things: a book she'd left in the laundry room, a pen she'd dropped in the hallway, and staying a few minutes longer each time. They started having coffee together on Saturday afternoons, first at the kitchen table and eventually out in the city, walking through neighborhoods and talking about architecture and food, and the kind of music that had meant something to them in their 20s. He learned that she was a graphic designer who had rebuilt her freelance career from nothing and was now doing the best work of her life. She learned that he had not opened his personal sketchbook, the one where he drew buildings purely for pleasure, with no client brief and no deadline since Renata died. One afternoon in early spring, about 6 weeks after the knock at the door, Marcus opened the sketchbook. He sat at the kitchen table with afternoon light coming in through the open window, and he drew for 3 hours without stopping. When Sienna came over that evening and saw the sketches spread across the table, she looked at them for a long time without speaking. Then she looked at him and told him that Renata would have loved them. He didn't ask how she knew. He already understood that some things don't require explanation. He was not healed. He would not have claimed to be healed. Grief doesn't work that way, and he had stopped expecting it to. But he was present. He was in his own life again, occupying it rather than haunting it, and he had a neighbor across the hallway who had refused, with quiet and absolute conviction, to let him vanish completely. Some people enter your story as a chapter, others arrive and quietly change the whole book. If this story reached something inside you, if it reminded you that someone in your life might be sitting alone in the dark right now, waiting for a knock, they're too proud to ask for, please hit the like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Your small act might be someone else's turning point. And before we close, drop a single word in the comments below that describes how this story made you feel. Just one word. Let's fill this comment section with something real. Some of the most important doors in life don't open until someone finally finds the courage to knock. Be that person. For someone else, or for yourself, it's never too late to stop disappearing.